Today I'll be going into control flow, and then I'll be looking at the ternary operator, and I'll be finishing up there. Okay. First, I want to show how to run a file. Before, I was running everything in the Repo, and this time I'm going to run a simple hello world just to show how to compile and run this. You can see I have a print line statement, and then I have a file.jl. And now in the terminal, and you want to make sure you're in the correct folder. So in my case, I'm right in the same directory as this file. I'm going to call it, call that, and run it. Okay. And if it called correctly, it should have compiled and run, and you got the output. So if you have that, then everything's fine. Okay. Now looking at control flow, that involves using an if, an else, an elseif, anything like that to control logic and solve out whatever problem you're trying to do. Let's look at an example. So let's say we have x equals 1 and we want to look at if x is positive or not. So if I put if x greater than 0, prints out x is positive, else prints out x is not positive. Alright, and I forgot one more thing, and end. Okay, now looking at what's going on here, we have our first if case, and if this statement comes out to being true, then this will be printed out. If this statement is not true, it will go to the else case, and this will be printed out. And this will end, and that'll be the end of the code for this example. So if I run this, x is set equal to 1 right now, you should see x is positive. And then if I go back to the top, say make x negative now, x is not positive. Okay, so right now I'm looking at just if x is positive or not, but let's say I want to make this more complex and add another case. Else if x is less than 0, print ln x is negative, period, else print that. Okay, so you can see I added another case. In this case, it's an else if. And here, now it's going to look at each logical statement until something true comes out. So first thing, it's going to check this. If this is not true, it's going to go to the next one. If this is not true, then it goes to the next one. And wherever it stops is what it'll print out. If I run this again, now it's going to say x is negative. And then I didn't change this. But now, since we're covering x is positive and negative, this final case has to be x is 0. So let's now show that it's going to that last case. X is 0. See, and then here it's evaluating. It shows that 0 is not greater than 0, and 0 is not less than 0, so then it has to be this. Now, if I wanted to show greater than or equal sign, I can do this, and that would work out for the first case. I could also do the same thing with less than or equal, put that over here, and now it's saying that 0 is negative, which is not correct. Okay, now let's add another layer of complexity. We have now a y, and y is 10. Now, to look at more statements, I'm going to use parentheses to separate out. And we want this first statement to look at both y and x to be positive. Now you can see here I'm using an ampersand. So this means that both x and y have to be positive. X and y are positive. Both of these statements have to be true, and then this if statement will work. And if I do the same thing here, y is less than 0, and then add another layer, else if x is greater than 0, or y is greater than 0, x or y is positive. X or y is 0. X and y are negative. Okay. Now let's go into the code here. In here, I'm looking at x is greater than 0 and y is greater than 0. If these both be true, then this statement is produced. And this is the same idea, but now this is seeing if x and y are less than 0. And then I have an OR case. This is one of these have to be true, and this will be produced. And this else statement is a catch-all, and if none of these happen to be true, then it will always produce this. So let's check it out. If I make this negative and I run it, x or y is 0. Okay, so I got down here. Now let's say I make this 10, x or y is positive, and make them both positive, x and y are positive. Okay, and now there's another thing happening underneath. So let's say I made this 0 and left this positive. X or y is positive, and you can see once to this statement. Now, even though this statement is also true, x or y is 0, this is a true statement, it evaluated this statement first. So it went down, it got to here, it found that x is not greater than 0, but y is greater than 0, so it's gonna run this instead. So this is something called short circuiting. If you get to here and it gets to this statement and just short circuits over everything else, it happens depending on how your logic is done, and it's also something to be aware of, because if you're not covering all your cases, it could cause your code to miss something. But in here, I mean, here it's not as big of a deal, but you can see that both of these statements are true, but it's only going to run this one because it's going to stop right here and exit out. Cool. Now, another thing I want to look at is the ternary operator, which is a much simpler case. X is greater than 0, question mark, println, x is positive, println, x is not positive. Okay, now I'm going to comment this out, and we'll name this 10 right now. Okay, now this is a ternary operator, and this is pretty much the same exact case as the if-else case I did in the beginning. You can see it has a logic right here. If x is greater than 0, it will do everything in between this question mark and this colon. And if x is not greater than 0, then it will produce everything on the right of this colon. And for this operator to work, you need to include the spaces, so it knows that these are the operators that you're using. So if I run this, x is positive. And if I change it again, run again, x is not positive. Okay, now this is my little 2 cents, but I don't personally like this. The ternary operator is a bit technical, and if you're working on a team with people that don't have a computer science background, but they have to work with your code, or just like look at your code, then this might be obscure to look at. The if-else case is definitely more clear. If this, do that, else that. While this is just, you know, it's technical. If you're working with just computer science people, it's fine. But it's good to put a comment on what this is doing or anything like that. Okay, So that's pretty much it for a control flow. I wanted to do a simple if-else case and show the syntax for how to write them out in Julia. And in the next video, I'm going to be going over arrays and how to work with them and how to visualize them.